Hello, everybody. I am Jillian Sakovits. A very warm welcome to Full Time. On today's show, I'll be joined by the Athletics' Tamerra Griffin to talk all about the U.S. women's national team's 3-0 victory over Canada on Wednesday that closed out a FIFA window for the USA that featured 3 wins, 3 clean sheets, and 11 goals scored. And after that, we'll have the second half of our interview with Canada head coach Casey Stoney, where she talks quite candidly about her experiences as a player competing at the Euros with England back in the 2000s and just how much the game has changed in England since the Lionesses lifted the country's first ever title in 2022. And before we bring in Tamerra to talk all things USA, here are some quick programming notes for you. Euro 2025 is underway, the tournament kicking off in style on Wednesday with Finland beating a 10-player Iceland side 1-0, and then the host Switzerland suffering a heartbreaking 2-1 defeat to Norway. There was a lot of chaos, and it was just day one. We are only 2 games into this month-long tournament. We're going to be dropping our Euro 2025 episodes called, yes, you guessed it, Full-Time Euros, after the final match of every round. So the group stage round 1 analysis will be with you wherever you get your podcast Saturday, July 5th. Keep an eye out for that following England's game against France. Get ready because there will be 8 Full-Time Euros podcasts dropping across the tournament. And we even have a fun new tune that we want to share. A little Euro, a little Swiss, a little techno, makes you want to move, which, is important when you're talking about a sport. So alongside Full-Time Euros, our flagship full-time show with Meg and Tamerra will still be coming to you weekly. Instead, it'll be dropping on Thursdays for the month of July. And when you're not listening to the pod, go check out all the coverage from Switzerland over at The Athletic. Like right now, you can dig into Charlotte Harper's piece from England's team headquarters in Zurich with the latest from Serena Wigman on how the Lionesses plan to combat the heat that is going on in Switzerland at the moment. Or Ali Rampling has the latest on Iceland captain Glódis Vigósdóttir's availability after she departed their opening defeat at halftime. So yes, on the podcast, on the site, Full Time has you fully covered for the Euros. On a night where we saw the U.S. win both games, that's right, the men advancing to the Gold Cup final and the women winning 3-0 over Canada. For more on that, I bring in Tamerra Griffin. Tamerra, number 1 ranked, U.S. cruises past 8th ranked Canada in the Continental Classico. We saw the opening goal come from Sam Coffey. Shout out to Avery Patterson, who also just got her foot on that almost 49%. It just looks like the both of them kicked it. You love to see it. Then we got to see 19-year-old Claire Hutton get her first ever goal for the U.S. women's national team, and then Yasmin Ryan sealing the deal of 3-0. So I said it before, but I just have to say it again. In these 3 games, the U.S. outscores their opponents 11-0. Tamerra, you're coming to us fresh out of the press conferences. What stood out to you?
Honestly, how unfazed the U.S. was against Canada. I mean, when, they opened up their games in this international window with that pair of matches against Ireland, both 4-0 victories, pretty straightforward and smooth, I would say, for them, which of course allowed the U.S. to fine-tune a lot of the things that Emma Hayes has been wanting them to work on. But I think the timing of and the schedule of these games were sort of building toward this big continental rivalry with Canada. And I have to say that I thought Canada, for the first 10 or so minutes at least, started out quite well, and was thinking to myself that I was already beginning to see the effects of new head coach Casey Stoney's impact on the team. Even as the U.S. maintained the front foot pretty much from kickoff. I mean, Canada still had a couple of chances. Claudia Dickey, who got her second start and second cap with the U.S., had to make a critical save, ironically against her club teammate Jordan Huitema from Seattle Reign. But I do think after Sam Coffey's goal, Canada began to unravel. And then they continued to unravel beyond what I sort of was expecting to see. I almost want to say that the sort of impact and magnitude of what it means for the U.S. to have won this game was about the same size for me as the disappointment from Canada.
It's interesting, Tamerra, that when you watch the U.S. and Emma Hayes rolling out 2 completely different starting 11s in the first 2 friendlies of this window in the 2 games against Ireland, but then you watch the 3rd game against Canada, and The words that came to my mind in watching it is, this just looks like a well-oiled machine. And that's completely nuts when you think about the fact that these are a lot of players' first caps, first goals. What stood out to me is Rose Lavelle post-game saying that it, quote, doesn't feel like an inexperienced group. And this is coming from Rose Lavelle. When you sat in on the press conferences, Tamerra, what was the chatter? What was being said?
Emma Hayes really offered a lot of credit to those older veteran players like Rose Lavelle, who I believe is the most capped player in this national team camp right now. Lynn Biondolo, who got the start. And in fact, Lynn was the only change from the very first starting 11 that Emma Hayes put out against their first meeting with Ireland. She replaced Ali Sentnor as the 9 in tonight's game against Canada. But players like Rose, players like Lynn, Emily Sonnet, increasingly Naomi Girma, and Sam Coffey, who are very much giving shades of captaincy leading going ahead. But she credited those older players and more experienced players with the influence that they're having on the many, many younger, newer, and less experienced faces that she's been bringing into camp. So that definitely stood out to me. And Emma Hayes she's taking this all in stride. You know, she said that you're only as good as your next game, and that even with this, rivalry, the history between these two teams, in the press conference, she said, we haven't won anything beyond this game. This is not a tournament. This is not a final, not even a regional final. It's a spicy matchup, of course, and US Canada is always going to provide a lot of entertainment. I don't think that this game was any different, but she is keeping her sights set on big international tournaments. Another thing that actually stood out to me from that press conference with Hayes is that she's not only building toward the 2027 World Cup with the senior team, she's thinking about next year's U20 World Cup with the national team. And so for younger players like Jordan Bugg, who is only 18 years old, despite playing with the national team and the U23s.
And impressed this window. She really did.
Totally. And has been in great form for Seattle as well. She's thinking about what it means for players like that to get experience at the senior level as they prepare for a younger tournament next year. So I think for me, that just added another dimension to the chess that she's playing and how she's developing not only the senior team, not only the 23s, but the U20s as well. And then on Canada's side, I was struck by, and pleasantly, maybe not surprised, but I welcomed Casey Stoney's candor. One of the things that she emphasized very clearly and without sugarcoating it was that Canada needs to get fit. She said they were not fit in this game, and especially for them to be conceding the ball as often as they did and not be able to recover, that exposed further their lack of fitness, which she attributed not to, not running enough sprints, but to the amount of play time that these Canadian players are getting with their clubs. And she said that given that all national teams are about to face a pretty significant gap, they're not going to be meeting again until October. And so Casey Stoney was saying essentially that she's going to be advising players who are not getting enough play with their clubs to seek greener pastures, essentially, as a way of helping them prepare for the national team. So definitely appreciated the straightforwardness and candor from both coaches. And it's clear that they were both taking this match as just, another data point as they both build to bigger tournaments.
Yeah, you see that across CONCACAF of there might be glitz and glamour of going to a certain club or a certain league, but it doesn't mean anything if you're not getting the minutes week in and week out. You mentioned October. That's the next window of friendlies for the U.S. women's national team. More players will be available to Emma Hayes. She'll be going, of course, way outside of this NWSL bubble, plus Naomi Girma that she did. Now, what answers, Tamerra, would you say Emma Hayes has answered as she looks to October?
It's funny because I think sometimes I myself, at least personally, forget that months ago, Emma Hayes said that it was around this time that she wanted to identify her core group that she was going to begin developing as, they build toward 2027. And though she hasn't, and probably won't release a clear roster with names publicly, at least, I do think that these 3 games especially have provided a lot more clarity to that. I think players like Claire Hutton, who is only 19, got her first international goal against Canada off a beautiful header from Rose Lavelle's corner kick. Players like that, I think, have made an extremely strong case for themselves, literally go to 2027, if you ask me. I think players like Avery Patterson, who also scored her first international goal during this window, strong case. I think Lily Real, this was her first camp coming up from the U23s. Strong case. So like I said, I'm not expecting, though it would be great, Emma, if you're listening to this, to drop that core player roster. Realistically, I'm not expecting to see that. But I do think that questions, at least in terms of individual personnel and their readiness to sort of take their game to the next level and to advance with Emma Hayes' project, definitely became a lot clearer after this window.
It's been no secret that Emma Hayes is a big fan of Sam Coffey, whether it's her play, her ability to absorb, and even, as a veteran, continue to learn. One thing that she loves about her, joking about her incredible tuck, which I feel like after Emma Hayes made the joke about how much she tucks those shorts, that Sam was like leaning even more into that tonight. But on a serious note, Sam Coffey just scoring again. After having one goal, Tamerra, in her first 33 games for the U.S. Women's National Team, she now has 3 goals in her last 5. It's really nice to see her clicking and just looking so comfortable and having so much fun. I think Julie Foudy said it on commentary that she almost looks surprised when she scores. I don't know if she'd love that, but there's something very earnest about it that she's enjoying this form that she's in.
100%. I am big on body language, and on the celebration point, I personally have seen from the first of her 3 goals to now, I do think that even though the celebration, the gesture itself is the same, I feel like the look of surprise on her face is decreasing with each goal, which makes sense because it's starting to become a thing. And I actually asked her about this in Colorado, where I covered their first match against Ireland. She's been on a bit of a tear, and she actually did reveal that getting forward and more involved in the attack has been a point of focus for her recently, for club and country, because she's scoring goals for club too, mind you, with the Portland Thorns. So it's been really cool, I think, to see the fruits of that effort. And it's also interesting to just think about that in the context of the role that she plays on the team, and how that's just adding another dimension, not only to her game individually, but what the team can pose as a threat. The fact that she's able to score goals, which you don't typically see that much from a 6. But yeah, Emma Hayes, whenever asked about Sam, is effusive with praise. She picked up the captain's armband from Lynn Biondolo in their second match against Ireland. She's, of course, the captain on the Portland Thorns as well. The path that she's walking is clear, and Emma Hayes said in the press conference today that she thinks Sam Coffey is in the form of her life. She said previously that she was surprised that she was not already a regular fixture on the U.S. Women's National Team when she took the job as head coach. So I do think that with all of Emma's candor and careful sort of, she never wants to get too high, but she's been very clear in her praise for, and I think plans moving forward for Sam Coffey.
Something that we didn't see a lot of in the 2 friendlies against Ireland is the goalkeeper being tested.
Yeah.
But now it feels a little bit like Claudia Dickey is the answer. We saw today her second appearance for the U.S. Women's National Team. She gets tested with the 2 saves, including a really impressive close-range save early on. What are your thoughts, Tamerra, on the goalkeeper situation?
If you sort of separate this position from the rest of the team, I feel like you could almost make it like a drama, or some sort of like the good kind of competition reality shows that don't have a lot of infighting and catfighting, but is actually just good television. Because we cannot forget about Fallon Joyce, who, of course, like all the other Europe-based players, are enjoying much-deserved time off. What I'm looking forward to, I feel like at the end of this window is sort of the equivalent of being left at one of those end-of-season cliffhangers. Because come October, I am going to be very, very curious, not only to see who is going to get this. I mean, and mind you, we don't know who the opponents are going to be for these friendlies coming up in October, but no matter who they are, I am already very curious to see not only who gets the start between Fallon Joyce and Claudia Dickey, but how they perform against each other, assuming that each will get playtime. And if they don't, that will also be a statement too. I think before this camp, the sort of discourse was very heavily leaning toward Valentellis Joyce. Claudia Dickey, I don't think was tested quite as much. I mean, definitely those 2 saves were huge. But I think we still need more data points because unfortunately across really most of the games this year, save for those pair of matches against Brazil, the second of which definitely provided more tests. Yeah. We still haven't seen quite too much, but the fact that we're even sort of debating now between 2 goalkeepers feels like progress, considering where we were when Alyssa Nair announced her retirement last year.
It is. It felt like it was just a total coin flip, toss of the dart. You couldn't figure it out, and there's a race, and it's fun to watch, and it'll be continue to watch it. Before we say goodbye, Tamerra, I have to ask you, who is the Tamerra Griffin player of this international window?
Ooh, that is such a good question. So Emma Hayes invited 10 defenders to this camp.
She did.
Lots of new faces. I know I've spoken at length, including on this very podcast, about how impressed I've been by Lily Real. Emma Hayes is also impressed. I do think, though, that for me, I'm sticking with the defender, but the edge almost entirely having to do with the fact that she scored a goal also during this camp, for me, is going to Avery Patterson. I think she has been absolutely phenomenal. And it's funny because there were at least a small handful of moments during this game against Canada that she would get the ball up high, cut inside, as we've seen her do many times with the Houston Dash, and you could just see how badly she wanted to shoot the ball because she's done it. She's like so capable of scoring those long-range ringers.
Goal today. The girl had a half goal.
She did have a half goal today. That needs to be a new stat. We need to reach out to Opta.
I mean, when you both swing at it and both it looks like your toes hit the ball, I couldn't get over it. But
right. At
anyway,
least
that is my untrained
half assist,
eye.
half goal or something.
Yeah.
But she's been fantastic. And Emma Hayes made a really interesting comment, because I have mentioned Lily Real as well, who to me is on the short list of most impressive player from this camp, that Lily Real, who played center back in college before moving to the outside for club and country, is stronger on the defensive side of the ball. She's better at sort of playing back, whereas Avery is a little bit better going forward, which is a really interesting dynamic when you were looking at 2 fullbacks. But Avery has just been fantastic. And I can only imagine, and I mean, I know because I asked her about this in Colorado as well, but I can only imagine how these experiences in camp are going to benefit her when she returns to the Houston Dash, who I am perpetually rooting for. But Yasmin Ryan as well, 2 Dash national team goals is like a huge morale boost. But yeah, I'm giving that award to Avery. I think she was absolutely phenomenal this tournament, and definitely one of those players who is going to ask some hard questions of Emma Hayes, especially when those European players return.
Avery Patterson, on a serious note, getting her second assist on Wednesday for the U.S. women's national team. Tamerra, thank you so very much. Thanks for your excellent coverage throughout this window of all things U.S. women's national team.
Of course, happy to do it.
We'll send it now over to Meg, who joined Tamerra to talk to Canada's head coach, Casey Stoney.
Let's pivot to the Euros. Speaking of summer tournaments, you've played in 3 as a player, including when England hosted in 2005 and when they made the finals in 2009. How did you prepare for a tournament like that as a player? And what sorts of changes have you seen from your playing days in the Euros to what we're witnessing now, heading into 2025 and also with 2022 in terms of preparation, the hype and anticipation generated around this tournament? I imagine it's quite different now.
Oh, night and day. It's a world away. I look back to 2005 and I was working, so I'd have to either train after work or before work, and then I had to take unpaid leave to get the tournament off. So
wow.
Similar in 2009, it was exactly the same situation then. So you think about trying to prepare, working, well, I used to work in gyms and stuff, so early hours till late hours, but trying to fit your training around it and make sure that you're fit enough and have contact time. We trained twice a week with the club back then. Then we go into major tournaments and train every day. So therefore your load changed different a lot in those times. And I think I always prepared the best I could, because I always wanted to know when I crossed the white line that I've done everything possible to be prepared physically, because that's what I could control. I could control the physical element and obviously learn about my opponents. And, I was a big, quite kind of analyst type player. I needed to know, I wasn't quick, so I needed to know my opponents before. I needed to know their movements before they were even going to make them. So I was kind of an analytical person as a player, and I wanted to control the things that I could control whilst working full time. So I think prep looked a little bit different. I think then now the professional area of the game, the prep time that players have, the amount of support they have from sports science, medical, coaching, it's a world away, but that's where it should be. Players should have every support they can to give them every chance to be successful, and every team will go into this competition better prepared than ever.
Casey, maybe one thing that hasn't changed is the way a team feels inside a camp. And just looking back to your experience as a player, like, how did you approach that mission of being together as a group and blocking out kind of everything that was happening outside? Because, maybe the coverage has obviously increased and social media is playing a completely different role. But I do still feel like there's something at the heart of being a team in a tournament and being inside that locker room that probably hasn't changed that much. Would you agree with that assessment?
I think togetherness is so important. Like, I really do. I think you're not always going to like every single person in your team in terms of, like, they're not going to be best friends, but there has to be respect and there has to be a common goal and a common vision that you're all working towards. And I used my experience in 2017. Mark Sampson was the manager. I knew I was never going to play under him anymore, but I was still picked because I think he knew I had a leadership role within the team. And my mindset changed from playing to, like, what can I do to influence the environment in the best possible way? How do I push everyone on the field to be better? How do I make sure I'm asking the difficult questions in meetings? How do I make sure I'm raising standards? How am I keeping everyone connected? Because if we go on and win, I still feel like I've played my part, no matter whether I've stepped on the pitch or not, because I probably knew I wasn't going to play. I had injuries during that tournament anyway, so there was no way I was going to step on the pitch. So it's like, what can I do away from that? And that was where my mindset changed. And I think togetherness is important. I think you need to know that you're going to battle and that you've got my back and I've got yours. And sometimes that can be the difference. Sometimes you can have all the talent in the world, but if you're not prepared to go the extra yard for each other and you're not prepared to work hard and go through because some really tough times in tournaments, especially when you're together for a long time. And I think having downtime is really important, like taking your kit off, going out, being a human being and refreshing so you don't get cabin fever, like having that balance and having the psych support in tournaments now, which we never had years ago. Someone who can help with the individual pressures, stresses. We all have lives outside that still go on for the 6 weeks you're in a major tournament. Like, sometimes you think, like, who are my people? I don't want to bring that in the environment, but who are my people that I can have on my bus to support me? And sometimes that might be the psych support. I might need to go and talk to them. I might need to offload, in terms of what I'm doing. And I think all of that support now and that togetherness can really create an environment where you can go and be successful.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me a bit of what Emma Hayes described as the pain cave last summer during the Olympics for the U.S., but it really is such a unique environment. It's this pressure cooker. You're in this vacuum in a way, blocked out from the world, but as you said, still needing to be in touch with the world in order to stay grounded when you play. When I covered the World Cup in 2023 in Australia, there was also this post-tournament period that everyone was talking about. It was my first World Cup, so I didn't really know what to expect, but there is also the sort of come down from it when you're back home and fully immersed back in your normal life. Can you talk about what that experience was like as a player and sort of how you sort of think about that now as a coach, having, the information that you have from your own experiences about what it's like to sort of re-enter society after such a massive and weighty and emotional and physically taxing, of course, 5-6 weeks?
Yeah, I think I can speak to that really personally because I wasn't prepared for it, if I'm honest. I remember my first World Cup, 2007 China. We were away for a long time. You're always on a schedule. You're always with people. You're performing. You've got to be up here all the time. And obviously big crowds, lots of attention. And then I came back and I had to go to work like the next day. And
wow.
I'm not going to lie, I struggled psychologically and mentally for probably about 6 to 8 months after that tournament.
Wow.
Kind of lost my motivation dipped because I don't know what happened, but it was like oh, no one's around me 24/7. Oh, I haven't got a schedule. Like, this is different. And I just struggled. Like, and then I was going back and playing in a league where we probably had like 500 people watching us compared to 30,000. And I did dip. I massively dipped after that. And it kind of took me a while. And I had to get back to like, what do I need to focus on? I need to focus on process and getting better and improving it. But if you're not that type of character, you can stay in that funk for quite a while. And I do think that is a real thing. Like, when you come back, you can dip and you can struggle mentally and you can have a lack of motivation. And I think that's why it's so important that clubs have that support in as well to help players, because once you go away from international, you're back in your club. And also, if you haven't had a lot of time, you're back in and you haven't even really dealt and processed, especially if you've, say, got to a final and lost and it's like huge. Like, I remember 2012, we got knocked out in the quarters and it was in the Olympics. And I literally got in the car, drove to France and didn't watch a single part of the Olympics anymore because I couldn't cope with it. I needed to do that to enable me to be able to get back on the field again and start training and playing. And like, when you put your life and soul into something and the goal and the vision doesn't happen, like how you process that and come out the other side, it's not easy.
Yeah. Yes, there's no, I mean, I the honesty is really crucial, I think, because I mean, I even know, you know, as Tamerra and I, as writers, like, we come back out of a major tournament and we're like, oh my God, how do we go
it's
back
completely
to
disorienting.
Life? Right. And Casey, I do want to talk to you. You had already brought up 2022 and the impact of Euros for the Lionesses, for England. And, you know, you think about the level of attention just kind of ratcheting up all of these kind of external pressures. And like, yes, there are greater opportunities for players. I think like the player profile has been risen across the board. Euros also, even here in America, like, I feel like everybody was paying attention to them in a way that maybe this tournament hadn't really cracked through. And so can you talk us through maybe how you view 2022 and its impact on England, but even from like a global perspective?
It was massive. Like, it did go global. Like, obviously, like, personally, like, it impacted me. Like, I remember being so emotional after the tournament because I obviously invested like 18 years of my life into the team. And also, I always knew, and this is what hurt me every time we got knocked out, I knew that if we could have success at the highest level, I knew the impact it would have on the country and on the game. And in a game, especially in a country where you've been told your entire life that you shouldn't be playing the game. You're a girl, you don't play football, it's not done, like, no opportunities, everything's a struggle, everything's a battle, you don't have resources, like, you have to fight just to be in the game every single day. To then have success, I knew that could change things. So, you know, I know that there's been a big campaign around school sport, because when you're a girl in England, it's netball, it's hockey, it's athletics, it's rounders, it isn't football, you know. So for us, that's a change. You know, now it's going to be integrated into schools, which is a massive thing. You know, more girls wanting to take up the game. Like my little one's going out to, you know, get an Alessia Russo shirt for the tournament, because obviously I signed Les. It's full circle moment. She was my mascot at Charlton. I then signed her, and obviously my kids got to know her through at Manchester United and are huge fans of hers. So, but I also think there's an element of caution as well, because with your success comes more scrutiny. With more scrutiny, some people will put you on a pedestal just so they can knock you off. And I think we haven't always been trained and educated and supported on how to deal with that. The social media, the platforms can be brutal. And I learned that when I was at Man United. That's such a big global brand. You have so much attention, and it's not always positive. And I came off social media when I was at Manchester United because of that. And I told my players, like, you're only ever as good as your last game. And if you read it on your good days, you're going to read it on your bad days. You don't know who's typing on that keyboard. It could be someone that hasn't got a clue. They also don't know what the manager's asked of you. And what the manager's asked of you, you could have been a 9 out of 10. But just because their opinion is you didn't do what they thought you should do, they're going to have an opinion. So I always advise my players to come off it in major tournaments. I remember speaking to Naomi Gurman before the Olympics, and I said, do yourself a favour, just come off it. You don't need it. All you need is your family, your teammates, your coaches. If they are saying you're doing the right thing, you're on track. Like, everybody else doesn't matter. If you're going to be great, you'll find out about it at the end, you know, and things will come for you and your life will be successful, which it has been for her, and what an incredible human she is. But at the same time, I do think it can bring players down. And I always think, create a bubble. What you don't read doesn't hurt you, and sometimes ignorance is bliss. And if you just stay in that for 6 weeks, it's not hard. It's harder for the younger generation, because I think, unfortunately, they put a lot of their self-importance in likes and messages and tweets and social media, whereas it really isn't that important. So that is something I think we need to be cautious about.
I'm really glad you brought that up. And I've even seen, ironically, via social media from players, the way that increased profile is even impacting them in person, with fans, taking liberties or feeling entitled to their time, their energy, their signatures after games when they show up. So I can imagine how at least being able to control part of that can help give them some sort of insulation. But I've also seen, especially since that 2022 Euros, with those Lioness players, the way that their profile is sort of opening them up to sorts of treatment that they might not have had to deal with before. But thinking about sort of things that have shifted since 2022 for English players, for Lioness players, and even in the WSL broadly, Casey, have you noticed any other sorts of institutional shifts in how women's football is handled in England? I know that there were a lot of comparisons after the Lionesses won in 2022 to the 1999ers at the 99 World Cup. But, that's a very Americanized projection. So I'm curious to hear from your perspective what other changes you've seen. I know you mentioned that there's an increased access to women's football for girls in schools, but are there any other shifts that you've seen since then?
Well, I think if you take Arsenal as a bit of a case study in the crowds that they get now, and they're going to play every game at the Emirates next year, I think if you put the right investment into your marketing strategies and you put the game in the right places at the right times, you can see there's been growth within the crowds, and I think that is the investment in that is really important. I think the profiles have grown. The players are now, I'm watching TV at home and I keep seeing them pop up on adverts. So they're earning real money outside of their contracts, which is fantastic for them longer term, so they can set themselves up. I think there's still a piece around education to make sure that players have a dual career pathway, because there is a few select players that are going to earn enough money that they don't have to work again. Everybody else is going to have to have a second career, and it's not like you're going from one job you've worked into another. You're going to have to go into a completely new world, and how you re-educate and how you make sure that you sell yourself on a CV and to employees and you become employable after you finish. There's an education piece there, because when I was playing, we all worked, and I feel blessed for that, because I've got work ethic and I know how to work in an environment and lead a team, and I think that's set me up for success. These players now are going to have like a 15-year gap on their CV in terms of employability. So it's like making sure that we protect that. I think it's great that they're earning money outside the game. I think there still needs to be a lot of education around social media and protecting yourself. Like, you're more accessible than ever. So what are you posting? How are you posting? How are you letting people into your life, and how much you want them to see and get to know you? Because I experienced it a little bit when I was at Arsenal, when people came over and started touching my kids, and I was like, you don't know my children, like, please don't.
Wow.
But because they've been on social media and they've seen them, and I'm like, right, that's got to stop. We're going to stop posting about the kids because they feel like they know them. So just some areas of caution. But I think now, obviously, with the WSL as well, with the new company that have taken over and how they're looking to progress the league and increase it and bring more teams in, the professionalism of all clubs now, it's great. I think there's an element, I think we're following the men's game, the amount of manager sackings, that frightens me. And as head coaches in the women's game, we don't earn enough to get sacked overnight and be able to be comfortable. I've been in that situation, and it is really, like, ours was terrible. I got fired, we had no home and anything. So it's a really tough situation to go through. Clubs are investing more money. That means less patience. That means results. And we need to be prepared for that as coaches now. And I know in England, they have a lot of support for coaches. That is really lacking in the NWSL. So, you don't have a lot of support. You don't have a union. You don't have anyone you can go and bounce ideas off to. Whereas in the UK, that is a very big difference. But I think the game globally is growing. And I think the infrastructure and support needs to move with that growth, not just player wages. Everything else needs to keep growing with it as well.
Totally agree. All right, Casey, we know your time is valuable, but before we let you go, we do have to just ask you real quick, what are you looking forward to about
the 2025 Euros. I mean, are you gonna head over to watch some games? Or are you gonna be staying at home, watching on TV with your kid? Like, what's the vibe, and what are you most excited about with this tournament?
I'm super excited. Like, I think it's going to be one of the most competitive Euros ever. I think I think you would put Spain as the favourites right now in terms of the way they play and the amount of talent they've got. But I think England can be up there. I think they're going to have a real go. That's a real tough group to start off with. I was hoping to get over. Unfortunately, I'm probably not going to be able to during the summer, but I will be watching closely on TV and making sure that I'm also watching the teams that we might draw in 2027 if we qualify to get there. So yeah, there's selfish reasons to watch it, but also I need to be prepared for us when we come up against these teams.
100%. Yeah, this tournament feels like it's building on 2022 in a lot of ways, but for me, there's no clear favorite. I mean, I'm with you with Spain, but only just. And something special happens, I think, to the Lionesses when they're in these big tournaments. So even though there's been a bit of inconsistency, of course, a lot of surprises with regards to the roster leading up to the tournament, but it's very much an anything can happen tournament for me. So we must watch. There's no choice.
I think also with England as well. Like, you think about some of those players that have been long-term injured and now back and fresh.
Right.
The Lauren Hemps, the Georgia Stanways, they're the Alex Greenwoods. Like, yeah, they haven't had a lot of football.
Lauren James.
Yeah, Lauren James. The benefits are they're back and they're fresh and they're going to be willing to go.
100%. I can't wait. I'm going to be pumping myself chock full. I'm going to be a glutton. But Casey, thank you so much. Your insight is invaluable to the conversations around this game, and we always appreciate whenever you're able to make the time to join us for the show. Looking forward to the next one.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, there you have it. A brilliant part 2 of Meg and Tamerra's conversation with Casey Stoney. Thank you to all three of you for that. I found it raw, authentic, and incredibly open from Stoney, and oddly relatable, I think, for anybody that's listening, because it's the glitz and the glamour in front, but we all know the struggles and the kind of ebbs and flows that come with motivation in life. So thank you. I really enjoyed that very, very much. So that's our show for today. In case you didn't know, The Athletic has partnered with Yahoo Sports to provide free best-in-class coverage of women's sports. That's right. Go check out the Women's Sports Hub at sports.yahoo.com/women-sports. That link, of course, is in the show notes for you as well. This has been Full Time. My name is Jillian Sakovits. Make sure to go follow the show on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok at TA Full Time. Full Time simply would not happen without our podcast producer, Theo Lloyd Hughes, our video producer, Leah Griffin, and our executive producer, Emily Olson. We'll see you on Sunday for the first edition of Full Time Euros.